Philanthropy has an opportunity to be catalytic, like almost no other organization out there. And just like the other sectors, when you go back, there are only a couple of early foundations, Ford Foundation, Rockefeller Foundation, some of the big ones, that started looking at impact investing. Mm-hmm. Now there's a much larger ecosystem, but it's still growing. So the SOCAP conference that's held every year in San Francisco is a really good place to learn for board members and staff of foundations to learn about how they can have more of a social impact, whether it be with their programming, the 5% that's granting every year, or whether it's the investment side of the portfolio.
You're listening to the Nonprofit Counsel Podcast with host May Harris.
Welcome to the Nonprofit Counsel Podcast. I'm May Harris, and today I'm joined by Dr. Paula Cordeiro, who is a phenomenal entrepreneurial spirit, who I think if I could say she's one of the most accomplished women I know, I think that would be not enough. So I am so happy to have Paula on the Nonprofit Counsel Podcast, and welcome to the show, Paula.
Thanks so much, May. It's a real pleasure to be here.
Oh, thank you. Well, maybe you can tell our listeners a little bit about yourself and why your entire career has been, in the educational, philanthropic, nonprofit, social enterprise sectors. And maybe you can just tell a little bit about how you got into this whole sector.
Sure, with pleasure. So I had spent most of my career in education, K-12 education as a teacher and a school principal. And then when I became a dean at the University of San Diego, we had nonprofit programs that we started. And so I had always been in that nonprofit space and within our leadership area. After 17 years as dean, I went international again, which is where I started my career. And for 5 years, I was working in microfinance. And during that time, I came across lots of people who were in the business space, in the private company space. And they were later on in their career, and they were really trying to make a difference because they said, I've made all kinds of money earlier in my career, and now I'm going to help this either a nonprofit organization or a for-profit, just do it better than what I did. And so I was living in that world of social entrepreneurship and from incubators to accelerators. And during that time, I'm also in the philanthropic world, sitting on foundation boards. And so I started to see this coalescing taking place.
Right. So for our listeners that might not be really aware of what the term social entrepreneurship really means, what would you tell them? What do you think social entrepreneurship means?
Oh, well, if you take a nonprofit organization, Girl Scouts, okay? Girl Scouts sells cookies. So yes, we give money philanthropically to Girl Scouts to support them. And I don't know what percentage of their revenue that comes in from the cookies, but we all buy Girl Scout cookies. So that's a nonprofit that has social entrepreneurship that's kind of in its DNA, and there's a social enterprise there. So you could be a for-profit, you could be a not-for-profit, but your focus is on having a social impact.
Right. And using capitalism or kind of business practices as leverage for that social entrepreneurial endeavor. So when you said it could be a for-profit or a nonprofit, it really is just utilizing business practices and capitalism. Really, conscious capitalism is another term that's bandied about a lot. But it's really that. And so it really doesn't matter what your tax status is. It's making a difference in your communities in a social entrepreneurial way. So you've been involved in social entrepreneurship for a long time. So how have you seen that kind of evolve over the last decade? Because there's been some great strides, I think.
Yes. So it started off a little bit slowly, but all of a sudden we're being surrounded by this change. And this is the beginning of what, Thomas Kuhn, who wrote about paradigm shifts. We are in one now. And it started in the 60s and in the 70s. And we see and continue to see different actors and different sectors coming together. So within the nonprofit sector, people started trying to diversify their revenue, and they would be creating social enterprises. Then as the legal world that you know so well, I know before we used to have for-profit companies and not-for-profit organizations.
And now, never the two shall meet, but
right,
now
exactly.
They're
it's a
meeting
continuum.
It's awesome.
Overlapping. And we hear, you said conscious capitalism, there's business for good, there's benefit corporations, there's certified benefit corporations, and then government is partnering with both of those other sectors.
Right. So it's really a full spectrum where it used to be government and then for-profit, nonprofit, and the mix is just, I think we're bigger than the sum of those three parts if we're all working in collaboration.
Exactly. It's a big Venn diagram and it's moving parts there.
Right. And it's not just the United States. So you're very, very involved with global social entrepreneurship, which is, I think I'd like to say that social entrepreneurship started in the United States, but it probably didn't. It probably started somewhere else in global entrepreneurship.
Yeah.
So maybe you could share a little bit about what you're seeing globally in this space.
Yeah. So, the Ashoka organization played a key role in this. And Bill Drayton is the founder of Ashoka. And his organization identified fellows all around the world that were doing amazingly, coming up with, amazing social innovations and creating in many cases, enterprises around them. So there are thousands of Ashoka fellows. So the ecosystem is what has grown. And then you have the Skoll Foundation and Jeff
Right.
Skoll, who created awards for social entrepreneurs, and who has had many cohorts pass through their doors, and they've supported them financially. And then lots of other entities, whether they be universities or foundations, have been promoting. And now we have nonprofits doing the same thing.
Right. And when you talk about foundations, so that was one of the first well-known social enterprises, I think, that most people in the United States might be familiar with. And that is Newman's Own salad dressings and pasta sauces and everything that's wholly owned by a private foundation. So it's, these are two great examples of nonprofits using social enterprise, great examples of for-profits using social enterprise. There's King Arthur's Flour.
King Arthur, by the way, right. King Arthur is not only, it's a certified benefit corporation and
right.
it's employee owned. It's an ESOP as well. So these are companies that have been really looking at the wealth building for their employees and really care. They have higher retention of their employees in these companies. Very exciting.
Right. And so you mentioned the legal perspective. So one reason is the whole legal kind of framework had to change to allow this kind of generative entrepreneurial, endeavor because, for hundreds of years, the common law is if there's a corporation or a separate entity that's doing business, you have one job, and that's to make profit, to maximize shareholder value. So, a lot of work had to go on behind the scenes to change the entire statutory framework so that they wouldn't be facing shareholder derivative lawsuits if they made a decision that was based more on social value than profit value. So the whole, one story I love to tell is the Ben and Jerry's ice cream. Mm-hmm. Because, they have always been very engaged in social activity and things that are important to their community. And when they sold to the big Unilever. Corporation, Unilever, exactly. And everyone got mad at them and said they were just hypocrites. They didn't really live their value. But at the end of the day, they didn't have a choice at the time. They had to maximize shareholder value. And the thing that I love the most is that Unilever is now a benefit corporation. They are a social entrepreneur. So it's almost like that seed was planted with Ben and Jerry's. It's made a huge change in the big guys. So it's not necessarily that those big corporations are stifling it. They're actually embracing it.
Yeah, absolutely. And you're so right about the ecosystem. So when I look out there, the legal ecosystem is part of the challenge. So 100%. ensuring that lawyers new to the profession are trained in these different kinds of business structures, or accountants. The entire ecosystem has to be strengthened so that somebody, if they want to sell their company and they don't want to sell their company to a private equity firm, and what other options exist for them.
Absolutely. Okay. Well, so we've talked about social entrepreneurship and how important it is and how exciting it is. I think both you and I get really excited when we start talking about it. But let's talk about philanthropy a bit, because as you mentioned, you've been involved with private foundations and sat on their boards for a very long time. I think James Irvine, was it the first one that you served on the board?
Yeah, I started in 2006 on the Irvine board. Mm-hmm.
Right. A dynamic, very impactful private foundation. And now in San Diego, you sit on the board of the Conrad Prebys Foundation, which is also making some incredible impacts, at least in the San Diego and Southern California community. So maybe you could speak a little bit about how you've seen philanthropy change, maybe in the same time frame, 10 years, 20 years.
Yeah. So as you know, philanthropy has an opportunity to be catalytic, like almost no other organization out there. And just like the other sectors, when you go back, there are only a couple of early foundations, Ford Foundation, Rockefeller Foundation, some of the big ones, that started looking at impact investing. Mm-hmm. Now there's a much larger ecosystem, but it's still growing. So the SOCAP conference that's held every year in San Francisco is a really good place to learn for board members and staff of foundations to learn about how they can have a more of a social impact, whether it be with their programming, the 5% of the that's granting every year, or whether it's the investment side of the portfolio. Now, internationally, the global, the GIN conference, the Global Impact Investing Network, is another place where, asset managers will get together with foundations to talk and look at some of the examples, about how we can invest in renewables, for example, instead of investing in fossil fuel. So there's a lot happening, but staff members and board members need to have even more exposure within the foundation world so we can do a better job of impact investing with our portfolio.
Right. So, those are the big guys, the massive guys, but even the smaller foundations and well off, larger public charities, when they look at their endowments, when they look at the money that they have invested, because they need to be prudent with their charitable assets, right? They can actually lead with intention, and they have more power, at least I think, to do that now than they've ever had. So you mentioned, you invest in renewables rather than fossil fuels. That's just one example. You can invest in companies that have good DEI policies. You can invest in companies that really invest in their employees, invest in their communities, have that certified B Corp, designation, which means that they're doing something in this space, rather than just focusing on maximizing the return on that investment. And some of these, it's not like you're not getting a return on your investment. I think they're more successful as a social enterprise in many cases. Would you agree?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a myth that you're not getting market rate returns or even higher. So yeah, university endowments, and we're starting to see more and more universities that have these kinds of policies. Family offices, some of the smaller family foundations are having these conversations. And because the Prebys Foundation is a fairly new foundation and our Impact Investment Committee is new, then we are working on our own investment policy. So we're looking at best practices that are out there. And yeah, it's not only what will you exclude, but also what are you going to include that you're focused on? And you know that some of those investments, some of them will be below market, others will be above market. But that happens anyway. So it's a lot of fun to work on these policies. It's a lot of fun. I was talking to a foundation in New York, and a colleague shared what his family foundation has put together. And, their assets are probably around 40 or $50 million, and they're doing it. And for, compared to a Rockefeller sized foundation.
Right, right. Well, so you have been involved in the nonprofit space through leadership and the University of San Diego for a very long time. One thing that I've noticed, and I think you might as well, is much more maybe it's post-COVID, I don't know, but much more collaboration between nonprofit organizations. So instead of looking at them as competitors necessarily, but looking at them as potential collaborators and partners. Are you seeing that as well? I mean, you are on the board of grant making entities. I would think that you would be seeing that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I sit on the board of a few nonprofits as well. And my students do projects with nonprofits. We just worked with a nonprofit organization to look at how can they expand their relationships with corporations, for example. And part of those conversations, it's not about the logo from the corporation. You want to partner with organizations. And I was suggesting to the nonprofit we were connected to that they might want to look at B certified organizations. So because it's built into their DNA with certification that they're going to be focusing on their community. And it's not about getting their logo out there and the company becoming more well-known. That's not their motivations. It's because they believe that they need to be good stewards of our planet, and offer their employees great work environments. And this particular nonprofit is able to help them do that.
Right. Well, that goes back to your paradigm shift, what you said. It's like we're so used to, book it as a marketing expense because then it's completely deductible. And that's what corporations want anyway. They want to deduct. It's all about taxes. It's not anymore. It's not about how they're going to book that expense. And it's not about, just writing a check or buying a table at a gala. It's much more, what kind of opportunities do you have for my employees to participate, to feel like they're giving back to their communities in various ways.
And May, on that, so I teach at USD, and I have in this program called the Masters in Social Innovation. My students are probably 24 to 30 on average. They will not work for some of the companies out there. They do their homework. They love it when they hear about the good work that a business is doing in the community, how they're treating their employees. Are they, the Better Business Bureau has a certification that looks at environmental and social and governance issues. They're looking at business for good companies, and they're always looking at benefit corporations. They're the ones driving it, and they're the ones buying products. These are students who go to Goodwill for their clothing. Okay. They're not, they're not everybody, but I'm just finding more and more young people are not the generation that I was, that you have to have all the designer clothing.
Right. Well, it's not what is most important to them. What they feel in their contribution, what they're giving to their community is the most important. And, I've spoken with a lot of guests who are really struggling with the lack of good personnel. Like there was the great resignation of COVID was incredibly impactful. So I've spoken with several guests who we've talked about how can nonprofits in particular, but this is across the board, how can employers, I'll just say employers, really be attractive to the best and the brightest? And it isn't necessarily how much money you pay them. That's important to everyone, but what is really important, what will differentiate two potential job offers is what it means to their heart, how it really impacts them in their inner self, right? And so your point is well taken. It's not just the 24 to 30-year-olds, but that is definitely the wave of the future. But I'm seeing it across the board, and you also mentioned, older people who have worked in corporate situations and environments for a very long time, and now they're ready to do something different. And used to be that you could only go into the nonprofit sector. That was the next step. But now there's such a huge possibility here. And it's a lost opportunity, I think, for profits in particular to not take a look.
The other thing I'm seeing, and it's connected to whatever age. So I did a lot of work in Rwanda, and there's a company in Rwanda. It is owned by the employees, and it is a certified benefit corporation. And they are making handbags, and they're located in this very remote village. Because it's employee owned, the monies are going to the local community. They have a community center, they have literacy classes, all kinds of amazing things happening. But they are making Coach bags. So they're making some high-end fashion industry materials, but they're doing it in such a way that their community is greatly benefiting. So if I'm going to buy a handbag, I'm going to buy a bag that I know that has that. It's a fair trade bag.
Exactly. Okay, so you have some really great things on the horizon. I know you're putting together a global seminar. Maybe you could tell us a little bit about what that's a huge thing. It's been a beautiful project of yours that you've been working on for a long time. So yeah, share a little bit about what you're doing there.
I have a colleague, a friend who had come to me. He owns a business in San Diego, and he's in his 50s, and he's started a family foundation, and he's looking at, what am I going to do with all of this money that I have, basically? And he's been supporting nonprofit organizations, but he wanted to make a bigger difference. So I invited him to come to an event we had for my students around benefit corporations and B Corp certification. And after that, he said, I want to learn more. And I've had people like him say that to me. So we've put together a seminar that we're going to do in 2025. It'll be 15 days, 5 days in San Diego, a couple of months later, 5 days in Spain, a couple of months later, 5 days in Rwanda. And we're going to be visiting companies that are marquee companies. There'll be certified benefit corporations. There'll be co-ops. We're going to the north of Spain, the Mondragon co-ops that are one of the largest set of about 110 manufacturing and retail co-ops, one of the largest employers in all of Europe, owned by the workers. So the creating wealth for local folks. So and people will develop a personal action plan so they can go back to their organizations or boards they sit on with lots of new ideas. So I'm super excited doing it with a couple of other colleagues. Everybody has different expertise, different background. And we're also looking at the role government plays as well, because nobody talks much about governments, how government can partner with philanthropy and with business.
Absolutely. So I can see why the gentleman that you described would be interested in this, but I think it could be very attractive to nonprofit board members, CEOs, executive directors as well, especially if they're considering, kind of not transitioning, but adopting more robust social enterprise in their organizations. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, absolutely. I was just talking with the folks who are helping us market this. And the challenge for us is, who exactly is our audience? Because there's such an overlap here. So there's not a natural place to go. So it's more folks who are like-minded, who know they need to be connecting, partnering, know they need to be looking at issues of sustainability, whether it be financial sustainability or environmental sustainability within a corporation. And they probably are not going to be early career people. They'll be mid and late career people as well. And people who serve on boards, any kind of board, that want to bring those practices to the organization.
Wonderful. Well, I'm really looking forward to seeing how that evolves, and hopefully it won't be a one and done and you'll keep doing it, because I think it sounds fantastic. So Paula, is there anything else that you would like to add for our listeners? Any thoughts, guidance, tips that you'd like to add?
No, only to say that we are now, this is growing exponentially, this movement. And it's going to be hitting a tipping point in a couple of years. So join my students, get on board. And I'm so excited and wish I was starting my career.
I actually couldn't agree more. So the changes that we've seen in our several decades of practice and work and experience in this sector, it's night and day, and it's so exciting. I think I couldn't agree with you more. Well,
makes your job a lot more complicated, May.
Complicated but exciting. I actually really like it. If you're doing the same thing day in and day out, that gets a little boring. So when there's always something new coming up down the pike, I get excited. But thank you so much, Paula, for joining us. It's been such a pleasure, and I hope to have you as a guest again.
Thanks for inviting me. Always good to see you, May.
You as well.
Thank you for listening to the Nonprofit Counsel Podcast. Are you ready to lead with clarity and confidence? Head to nonprofitcounsel.com to find the tools you need to start smart, lead strong, and create lasting impact.